Hi triathletes, and welcome back to another session with TriathlontesSA, where today I will explain to you guys how you should plan your training season, as well as share some tips of the mistakes that I've made in the past so you guys don't make the same mistakes. So let's dig in, starting to explaining how to plan your training season.
To accomplish something extraordinary, one must have an extraordinary dream. Ironman inspires us to reimagine our limits, to set our sights higher, to go farther than we ever have before. Ironman is a statement of excellence, passion, commitment. It is a test of physical toughness and mental strength. Ironman is about persevering, enduring, and being a part of something larger than ourselves. It shows the heights that can be achieved when we push beyond our boundaries and go the distance to earn the title Ironman.
The first thing that you should know is that there's 5 different training blocks that should be present somewhere within your training season. First off would be your off season, then you would need a base building block, and then an strengthen or speed training block, a race specific block, and then lastly a taper block as well. So let's dig in. The first one, an off season. An off season is usually where you take a break from your normal training and then just go out for an easy ride with your friends or a run, but the training at that time is not really structured, so you can do anything else, do some skiing or rowing or weightlifting, whatever you feel like doing. This is the time for your body to actually recharge, like a small holiday between your race seasons. Then next up, I would say would be your base building block. Your base building block would usually be the longest of all the training blocks, as that is where you need to work up to that over distance for your main race of the season. So first go and look what your main race is, and then according to that race you need to do the over distances. When you look at the over distances, for a sprint race you need to build up all the way to a 35-kilometer bike and an 8-kilometer run. For an Olympic race it would be a 60-kilometer bike and a 13-kilometer run. When you look at your 70.3, you need to work all the way up to a 120-kilometer bike and a 25-kilometer run. And then if you look at the full Ironman, I would say you need to work up all the way to 170 to 200-kilometer bike, and then about 80 to 90% of your race distance within a 36-hour period if you look at the running part. So say for instance, on the Saturday afternoon you'll do 2 or 2.5 hour run, and on the Sunday morning you'll do a 2 to 2.5 hour run again. Or you can take the distance and divide it into 2 as well. So that would be the base training phase, and within this base training I would say most or all of your training should be zone 1 and 2. So you can work on that aerobic capacity before you start incorporating some speed. Usually most people do the intense strength training or weight loss regime over this base training phase as well, because there's not lots of intensity. Your body does not need that long to recover because everything is low zone 1 and 2. So it's very easy to lose weight in this training block, and that's why most people do their strength training in this training block as well. Then next up, if you look at your strength or race speed block, in this block you would mostly focus on having that high end speed as well. So over here you'd start incorporating some intervals, but just remember the 80-20% rule. So 80% of your training still in zone 1 and 2, and then 20% in zone 4 and 5. So first start off by 5, adding 5%, 10%, and then if you get all the way up to 20%, keep it at a 20% level. Otherwise you would not see the improvements if you do too much in zone 4 and 5, and your body would need longer to recover as well. In this phase people would dial back a bit on this strength training and focus more on some functional training, where the focus is more on having that explosive power than having that strength power from doing some lifts in the gym. Rather do some box jumps or stuff that would help you be more explosive but still have that power component to it. And then the fourth one would be your race specific training block. In this training block you would focus more on race specific type of training. So you would have built your base, you would have built your endurance and your speed. In this section of your training block, most of the focus will be to going a little bit over that race distance. So instead of just doing it at your race wattage or your race running speed, I would say incorporate 5 to 10% above that speed or wattage. So your training sessions would be maybe 5 minutes over race pace, 3 minutes at race pace, 5 minutes above race pace again. So when race day comes, that you're at ease with that race pace, and it feels a lot easier for you to maintain that specific race pace because you've practiced a bit over race pace as well. This section is usually not that long, so if you look at the time frame from your base training and your endurance and your race specific, I would say you can divide it into two. So half of your training should be base, and then the other half should be divided into your endurance and your race specific as well. This will also differ from person to person, depending on how big a base you need to build and for which race you're training, what your background is, what your endurance was before you started this race season. Is it your first time starting out in tri? That factors will all affect on how long your base training season will be. And then the next one that most people forget is your taper block. That's usually about 1 to 2 weeks before your race, depending on if you're doing a sprint or an Olympic, which would be a 1 week taper, or a 70.3 or an Ironman, which would see you have a 2 week taper period. Most people think with the taper period they can just go and lie down on the couch and just take a complete rest. That's not how a taper week works. It's used usually as recovery, so your body can recover before your main race but still be able to perform at a certain speed. So usually in a taper phase, we'll still see you do some intensity, just dial back on the volume, so your training week would be a lot shorter, but there would still be intensities in there, so your muscles still know how to perform at that speed. And then the next thing that you need to decide on is how many weeks will you spend on training hard before taking a recovery week. Now that can depend anywhere from between 2 to 4 weeks. Say for instance you have a 2 weeks on period where you work really hard, and then a 1 week recovery, and then start off again with 2 weeks hard, 1 week recovery. Someone else might like a 3 week hard, 1 week off, or a 4 week hard and a 1 week off. That's also a personal preference and depending on what your body can handle as well. I have found that doing a 3 week or a 4 week on with then 1 week recovery is really taxing on my body, so I really like to have 2 weeks training hard and then 1 week recovery. So in the first week I'll do my training, and then on the second week I'll try and improve on the previous week's training before having a recovery week. So hopefully this have helped you to plan your training season, so you won't make the same mistakes as I did when I previously planned my training seasons in the past. So next up, I'll share with you guys some of the mistakes that I've made when I did planning for my previous training sessions, and also how I've changed that to incorporate some of the basic principles that you need to have an effective training season. So let's quickly look how I did my training previously when I show you guys on an Excel sheet. So first off, this is how my training season used to look in the past. If you look from January to December, you'll see I had a race almost every month. 70.3 is London, Midmar, Ironman, My Way 70.3, Durban 70.3, then July I'd usually have a bit off, and then 51.50 Bella Bella, Karoo to Coast, 51.50 Ekurhuleni, 94.7 and 51.50 again, and the Desert Dash, which is a very hard mountain bike race as well. So if you look at this training season of mine, nowhere over here which you have seen that I could have taken a full month off of training for the off season, and then after that start doing my base training. So for instance, I would take the off season over here just after the Ironman, but then that would mean that I had a 70.3 over there again, so then I would have skipped the base training and then gone back to endurance or race specific. So could not really take an off season in April, and if you move that one over and you try and take that in the 70 point after the 70.3, you'll have an off season in July. Usually in the middle of August you already have Bella Bella, so once again there would be no time to do a base training, and I would just move directly into race specific training as well. So if you look at this training schedule of mine for the 12-month period, there were too many races and nowhere where I could actually have an off season and build a great base to work from. So then I looked at my training schedule and I took out a couple of races, and this is how I did my new planning from 2020-21 season. So on the 29th of March I'll be having my last race for the 2020 season. Then I'll have 1 month off in April for off season, where I'll just do some normal cycling or running. I won't even look at my watch, just to relax a bit or do another sport. And then I'll start with base training in May. and then I'll just skip the 70.3 that I used to do in May. And then I'll focus on endurance training in June, so I'll skip the 70.3 in Durban as well, and then I'll go over to race specific training. So I'll be up and ready for the first Tritanium 3-day Ironman. That's an Ironman that's scheduled over 3 days, so that will kick my race season off, and then my race season will go all the way down and it will end at Ironman again. So once again, when you plan your season, the first thing that I would suggest is go and look what your main race would be. So if I look at this previous schedule of mine, I would have said that this would have been the main race that I want to focus on. So everything should be planned around this main race that I had planned. So off season should start right after that, and then you need to go and plan when you want to do races in between, or if that would be your only race. So if I looked at the training schedule, I would say the Tritanium 3-day Ironman would be more than sufficient for my first race. There's enough time in between that I can use for base training and off season as well. Say for instance I wanted to keep the My Way Durban and the My Way 70.3, then I had to decide, do I really need to do the Bella Bella 5150 and the Karoo Coast, so I could work in these 3 months right over here. So it's very important to go and plan your year effectively. First start off with what would be your main race, and then work from there onwards to the rest of the races. Then something that I just want to share with you guys. So if you look back at how this race season was scheduled, over here in my off season I would have taken some time off of training and just focus on something else, or just go out for a ride or run whenever I feel like. But in this base training season, you need to focus on your main goal. So if your main goal was an Ironman, you need to work up to that distance. This I would say would be the longest distance that you would be racing in your race season. You need to work up to that base during this base phase. Then if you do the endurance and the race specific, you would have had your first race if you took my schedule in August. Then you don't need to do base training and endurance again before the Ekurhuleni, because that one is just a cycling race. So you don't need to do the base training once again. You already did it when you did the overtraining for the distance over here. So between the Tritanium 3-day Ironman and the Ekurhuleni 5150, you would only repeat the endurance and the race specific training as well. So I'll take September and focus on endurance training and race specific, and the first week or 2 of October I'll do my taper for this race. Once again, there's 1 month between these 2 races. You don't need to do the base training again. I will just have 1 week endurance, 2 weeks race specific, 1 week taper, and then the race. And then I have about 2 months before I have the January 70.3, as the Desert Dash is once again just a mountain bike race. So I would have 1 month for endurance, and then I would have split the January into race specific and taper as well. So you don't need to do all of these phases before you attempt your next race. If you have built a good base during this base training, you don't need to repeat it afterwards. That's what I would suggest, that you take this base training, and this base training is focused on the longest distance that you're going to compete in the next race season. And that's it for today. Thank you for watching this session, and I hope you've learned from my mistakes and do not make the same mistakes as I did when I previously planned my training season. So please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and if you have not joined, please go and join my Instagram and my Facebook as TriathlontesSA, and the website will be up and running as well, so you can look for the link in the description as triathlontessa.com. And then keep up the training, triathletes, and I'll see you guys next week.